Several months ago, my wife and I began canning for the very first time. The reason we chose to do our own canning was she has celiac disease, and she uses a lot of chicken stock in her recipes. So we decided to try doing our own chicken stock. And we discovered several things in the process. One is we could make chicken stock for a lot less than we could purchase it in the stores. We discovered that it tastes better. And one of the reasons that it costs less is the chicken that you use to make the stock can be reused in recipes such as chicken enchiladas. So it really makes for a cost-effective way to make chicken stock, is to pressure can it yourself and save some money in the process and have better tasting chicken stock. So in this first video, we're just going to show you some of the supplies that you need to get started with your canning process. So in this section of the video, we're going to talk about some of the basic supplies that you need to do your own pressure canning. I'm going to focus first on the pressure cooker itself. We purchased this off of Amazon. I think it was about $79. It's a Presto 23 quart pressure cooker. We selected that particular pressure cooker because it can do 7 quarts at a time, which is a fairly large capacity. And it allows us to do our chicken stock in basically 2 batches. We typically do about 14 quarts at a time. So the pressure cooker consists of the basic pot, which is the 23 quart. Inside of the pressure cooker is a canning and cooking rack, and basically it fits down in the bottom of the pot and just keeps the jars located off the surface of the bottom of the pot. The lid itself has several safety features that are built in, because when you do pressure cook, this is under pressure, so it has several safety features. One is the vent pipe, which basically prevents the pressure from rising above 15 pounds per square inch in the cooker. So if it tends to run away, this will prevent it from going above 15 psi. Then there's also a regulator that fits on top of that vent pipe, and it regulates the pressure. There's also a safety switch here that when the lid is locked onto the pot, when pressure begins to build, this vent lock will raise, and there is a locking mechanism on the inside of the pot, so it'll prevent you from taking off the lid under pressure, because that's not a safe thing to do. It also has a pressure gauge that is mounted on top of the lid, and this just tells you what the pressure is as you're cooking. Depending on your elevation and the particular recipe that you might be using, you have to keep it at a certain amount of pressure for a certain amount of time in order to do your pressure cooking and make sure that the food that you're cooking is pressurized to a safe value. And what the pressure does in the pressure cooker is it raises the temperature of the product inside to get it to a safe temperature in order to safely sterilize the food for canning. Inside of the lid is a rubber seal that fits underneath the lid, and that provides a seal on the top of the pot, allows the pressure to build inside of the pressure cooker. It also includes an instruction manual and a recipe book. The instruction manual tells you how to safely operate your pressure cooker, and the recipes just provide various recipes for products that you might want to pressure cook. The next item in our supplies that we'll need for our pressure canning is the jars. So you need jars, rings, and also lids. Jars come in two different sizes. This is what they call a wide mouth jar, and then there's the lid that fits that. There's also the seal, which provides, or the lid that provides the seal during the pressure canning process. And there's also the regular mouth jar, so it's a little narrower in size. Also have the rings that fit on those jars, and it's important also to have enough seals on hand in order, whatever combination of jars that you use, whether all wide mouths or all regular size or a mixture of the two, you need to make sure that you have enough lids to complete your canning process. We also purchased a Presto 7-function canning kit, which has some pretty handy tools if you're going to be doing any pressure canning. The first of those tools is a combination tool. One has a magnet on the end for lifting your lids and also your rings out of the boiling water when you put them on your jars after they've been filled with whatever you're canning. There's also a bubble remover, which we won't use during the chicken stock canning, but if you're making jellies or jams and you need to remove some bubbles, you can stick it down in the jars and get those bubbles removed. There's also a funnel that allows you to just place it into the jar, and you can get your product poured into the jar. When you fill your jars with the chicken stock, we usually leave about an inch gap between the lid and the chicken stock to allow for room for pressurizing. There's also a jar lifter. This is really handy after the jars have been pressurized and cooked, because the jars are hot, so you can just reach down into the pressure cooker and use this to lift it out of the pressure canning pot. And then there's also a jar wrench. Just allows you to grab onto the rings of the jars to be able to tighten them onto the jars. There's also a pair of kitchen tongs. We won't be using those in the chicken stock process, but they would be handy for other projects. And then there's also a cooking digital timer, which is very handy, because as you're pressure canning, you have to bring it up to pressure for a certain amount of time, and that process does take some time. So having the timer on, you can go watch TV or go read a book or whatever, and the alarm will tell you when the pressure canning process is completed. And the very last item that I want to cover in the supplies section, especially for the chicken pot, chicken stock, is you have to have a pot, enough pots in order to produce enough of the chicken stock to fill 14 quarts. So when we're doing the chicken stock, we typically have 3 of pots about this size. They're not all necessarily the same, but you have to have pots for your chicken stock, for cooking the chicken stock and then keeping it warm while you're doing the pressure canning.